Welcome to Journalists on Journalism, a weekly podcast that provides unparalleled insight into the lives of journalists eminent in the field. This series is brought to you by Stanford's Masters in Journalism program. For more information on future speakers and to listen to previous podcasts, visit journalism.stanford.edu.
When I went to journalism school at Columbia, which is a university in New York City that is not here, I grew up here, so this is the last place I wanted to go to college because my mother is 5 miles away. But at Columbia, what we studied was how our elders did journalism. We essentially put our feet in their footsteps and tracked their path. We were just trying to figure out how they did it, and we were going to do that. Well, you're in a position where you're not going to do that. You're going to invent the next journalism because you have tools that your elders have never had. You understand how the new ways that people process and acquire information. You understand the potential of the technology in ways that your professors may, but may not. And you understand probably in an intuitive way where audiences are heading in a way that's difficult for people who are older than you to understand. So this is a spectacular time, I think, to be a journalism student. It is not, it's scary, but you will be the inventors and maybe even the owners of the journalism you create. In the current environment in Washington, D.C., that has no chance. It is not realistic. It is not going to happen. Wasting time on imagining that is not going to happen in the short term or in any foreseeable time frame. We have to reinvent a new economic model. And that reinvention is going to come from journalism realizing, in sort of historical terms, you're not in the railroad business, you're in the transportation business. We have to figure out what's our essential function for our community and invent new businesses that flow from that function. And this is about making things that we've always done explicit so that we will know to do them in this new world. Okay, and here are two new functions that I would add if I were writing this book or even updating the paperback edition now rather than a few months ago. The next journalism, and even journalism today, is shifting from being a product, here's our stories, to being a service. How can we answer the community's questions about whatever this is? One is to create community. And that came from a meeting I had with alternative weekly newspaper editors in New Orleans a few months ago, where they said, we're very conscious that we are creating a sense of the idea of what our community is. We're bringing people together around a myth, a mythology of what a community should be, aspires to be. I grew up in San Francisco, as I said. The most famous journalist of my youth in San Francisco was a columnist named Herb Cain. Herb didn't actually report the news so much as he wrote this sort of column about cafe life of San Francisco. Most people in San Francisco didn't go to cafes and go out at night, but they imagined that they might. He created a concept, a vision of Baghdad by the Bay that was the San Francisco that people sort of wanted San Francisco to be. And then I'd add an eighth one, or is it a ninth, tenth one, that came up when I talked with the Knight Fellows 2 days ago. You create a history, a sense of memory for a community. The archives of a news organization are an asset. And one that we have neglected for the most part through the history of journalism. We imagined that journalism was something that was disposable. At the end of the day, when I worked in newspapers, the cleaning crew would come at the end of the day with big black plastic bags and take all the newspapers from yesterday. You started over the next day with a whole new story. Journalism doesn't have to operate that way. Things don't disappear. Everything can remain and can be not only remain, but can be refined and updated so that the historical narrative makes sense. So creating a sense of history and memory for that, I think, is also one of the functions. And these functions actually should, I believe, influence the work that you do. And the reason for that is you should know what function or value the content that you're producing has for the audience, since they have so many ways to get information. Simply producing another piece of information that is entirely duplicative, that adds nothing new, that has no additional value, doesn't make a lot of sense.